As of June 6, 2026, after 3 long years, TDX has finally decided to touch up their first game mode. Overall, I think it was a good rework, but I think it had some minor flaws. First, I want to talk about what I liked from the game mode, and then what I think could have been done better in the game mode. So as for what I liked, the OSTs cooked up by the DJ are very good as always. Two big thumbs up. Shotgunner's Dilemma is a bit annoying, but I didn't sign up for this. The song that's playing right now is genuinely one of the best ambience tracks in this game, and all the others are pretty solid too. Another thing I really liked about the rework is that all the enemies look much nicer and their animations have a lot more personality. They're a nice step up from their previous selves. I also think the Mega Knight enemy is pretty cool and funny, and I appreciate that he was included. He's a nice shake-up from the rest of the enemies. I think they also did a good job on introducing more core mechanics, such as shield, speed gain pools, and most importantly resistances. The resistances were very well done. You're heavily encouraged to use bottom path rangers ignore resistance trait, which is great for teaching new players about resistances. I also appreciate the length of the transition from testing for bottom path rangers to testing for top path rangers. It makes it so you aren't scrambling to get an equal defense of both paths, and instead you can slowly build up both halves of your rangers. Overall, resistances are very well done. More on mechanics later though. Now as for some things I think were a little underbaked. Probably my biggest complaint is the hazmats. Their feature where their explosion pool speeds up your enemies is a pretty complicated but neat mechanic. However, when they first appear, they blitz through your defense, barely speed anything up, and create this large visual effect that's very distracting. The pool they leave is also just like a crater. It doesn't really signify anything about speed. These are problems because of the fact that when they spawned in, I was completely confused as to what they did. I didn't have time to read the dialogue and visual effects were really in my face. Paired with the fact that they were going really fast, which distracted me more so. More on dialogue later. I just think they were kinda odd and it was confusing to me personally, which probably means that new players aren't any better off than I was. My second complaint is Advisor's dialogue. It just doesn't last as long as I need it to sometimes. I think it'd be beneficial if the dialogue only disappears when the wave ends or when clicked. Obviously clicking it would be annoying, but you can disable dialogue if you like in settings. I also think voice acting, similar to how TDS does, would be nice for making the game both feel more professional and helping ingrain information better into newer players, especially the impatient ones who don't want to read Advisor's dialogue. A much more of a nitpick complaint I have is that night enemies aren't introduced into the game at all until Plague Doctor spawns them in. I think it makes it a pretty random tonal shift in the game mode. Obviously, as someone who has already played, I expected Knights and Plague Doctor, but to a brand new player, it's going to be pretty out of nowhere and random. I think they could have eased in through the waves leading up to Plague Doctor some Knights to get new players more accustomed to it, and maybe even make Mega Knight his own mini-boss, which I'll get into here shortly. Mega Knight felt a little out of place. Plague Doctor spawns him in, he jumps, then he dies. On my first two playthroughs, I didn't even see him jump. He was just randomly ahead of everyone else. I think maybe they could have incorporated him as a slight mini-boss. Having a mini-boss would definitely keep a new player on their toes, as most of the waves are just low health enemies with varying speed. Just a thought though, I don't know how they'd execute that or make it much more interesting than just plopping in a Mega Knight with a health bar. I also think that enemy resistance values are a bit confusing. For example, Advisor tells you to look out for bullet resistance, and when you hover over an enemy with bullet resistance, you can see this green shield symbol. I think it's reasonable enough to assume new players can figure that out. However, there is nothing really telling the player what the symbols mean, of which a couple, like fire, appear in the game mode alongside bullet resistance, and are never mentioned. I just thought that this was a tiny oversight that might trip players up on what resistances are which. And honestly, dialogue explaining that you can see resistances by hovering over an enemy would be nice. Another thing I just think I'd mention is that I'm pretty sure there's a bug where the music just stops playing. Hopefully it's fixed soon because it makes the game mode a lot more boring. Anyways, that's about it. Again, I think this rework was pretty solid, and I think they did an alright job. These are just some nitpicks I want to mention. Anyways, that's all really. Have a good day/night. See ya.